Hi, everyone. Welcome to Earthbound. Nice to see you all here. Our next presenters are Whisper and Shanhuan Manton from Secret Server Club. They're representing alongside core members Haley Roser, Nat Decker, and Alice Yuan Zhang. And I'm excited to introduce this project. What I find compelling about their work is that it relocates power. It takes something that we've been trained to experience as abstract and distant, the cloud, the server, the back end, and makes it tangible, local, collective. The infrastructure becomes the work itself, aesthetic, social, and political all at once. Earlier, I talked about becoming increasingly earthbound. As AI scales and the material realities of technology come into focus, Secret Server Club embodies that shift. Rather than imagining speculative futures, they enact alternative presence, building and stewarding real infrastructure within community. They collapse the distance between hardware and lived experience, reminding us the internet is not immaterial. It has weight, geography, and consequences. I'm excited for them to share more about how this practice unfolds. And just a little bit of an intro to both. Whisper is an artist based in Los Angeles, working across poetry, performance, software, and hardware. She dreams of computing that feels like augmented presence, cultivated through generations of loving care. She co-organizes Secret Server Club, Resonant.Love, and New Art City. Her work has been supported by institutions like LACE, I-Beam, and New Ink at the New Museum. Shanhuan Manton is an artist exploring methods of collective storytelling to realize the world of mutual flourishing we desire. Through experimental facilitation and pedagogy, narrative alchemy, and cinematic ritual, they seek to bring beings of all species into meaningful collaborations to make, maintain, and remake deep time relationships of nourishment and thriving. And with that, it's Secret Server Club.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hello. Hi. Thank you so much to Spectra for having us, and RipSpace, and Fuck ICE, Free Palestine, Stop Fucking Bombing Iran.
Land back.
Yeah, the earthboundness of technology today has been weighing on me rather heavily. But yes, hello, we are Secret Server Club. And what's this website behind us?
Well, this website behind us is Temporary Archive, which is hosted on a server a few blocks from here, which is our secret server. And it might need a little page refresh because it lives on a cellular internet connection. At what? Yeah. It's not on the session. Okay. So,
Press the button. This website is hosted on that computer right there. And that computer is called Free Computer, and a bunch of our infrastructure lives there. So we have a Git server, and we have this temporary archive where we can hang out and share documentation and memes and gifts and write together and chat. And we are represented by these little cursors that have our names on them. And you can actually join us right here, and you can upload and edit and delete any of the data. Just like if you're invited to our home, you can choose to bring flowers or you can break a vase. And so what is Secret Server Club?
well, Secret Server Club is a little dream that became a reality after several of us went to some hacker camps together. And we're like, what if we hosted each other's websites? What if we had the cloud in our closet instead of relying on these big evil corporations? And so we started out just making a website on the server that we put at Alice's space plot. And then since then, we've been developing a network of servers around Los Angeles that we want to call the Stone Soup Cluster. So thinking about stone soup, everyone brings something they have, and you end up with a delicious soup at the end. how do we do that with all the junk computers or other technology? And can we release ourselves from the grasp of the corporate cloud?
Absolutely. And the Stone Soup cluster feels like kind of a recipe for collective computing. And I think that's like an intentional divergence from like a tool or a repo, that it's more like a way of taking all of these technologies and hardware that exist that are pretty freely available and alchemizing them through parametric rituals into something that you can eat, as it were. And so this thing that Secret Server Club is doing is not unique. This is called a computer club. And there are other computer clubs, indeed another Northeast Los Angeles computer club that meets at Plot every other Tuesday. And there are many across the country where people are kind of returning to this idea of hacking and like being together and doing computer together in a physical space. But before we go further into that, what's whalefall? Whalefall.
Yeah, the title of our talk, Cybernetic Whalefall. So whalefall is what happens when a whale, famously some of the largest species in the ocean, pass away and fall to the ocean floor. And you can see behind us this delightful feast on the rot of a corpse. And we just want to invite people to think about how our living Earth has had a few million years to figure out how to make the death of keystone species into nourishing, life-giving events, not just for the rest of the seafloor, but for all of Earth, all of the living beings here. And thinking about the collapses of one ecological paradigm and what comes after, how can we learn from that? How is that potentially a model for dealing with the collapsing of other systems we're currently seeing? If we think about this bubble of AI computing, what potential lies in that?
Absolutely. And I think the word ecological is maybe what connects us back to cybernetics, right? That both of these are these kind of 1970s techno-utopian ways of thinking of the Earth as a system and thinking of all living beings as nodes and actors in the system, which are producing feedback loops that pass through the collective. Cybernetics comes from the Greek root kubernetes, which means like piloting or steering, or it's also the root of the word government. And it's also the name of Google's gigantic orchestration service that dominates the entire cloud. And so the way that you also refer to these walled gardens or factory farms as ecosystems, the Apple ecosystem and the Google ecosystem, what happens when that ecosystem collapses? And another example of like materially what this whalefall looks like is, I imagine many of us know that Windows 10 has been discontinued on 220 million devices, which is arguably the largest e-waste event in human history. But these are perfectly fine computers that can run other operating systems, but with kind of the stroke of a pen, they just declared all of these things trash. And so while we're looking bubbleward at the exorbitant prices of DDR3 or DDR5 RAM and GPUs, there is so much compute literally in dumpsters that there's so much that you can do by decomposing what they've left behind.
Yeah, so we want to invite a little meditation on matter as well, thinking about how all of our computers do in fact come from the ground, even as much as they want, some people want us to think they live in the clouds and are totally inaccessible. And with that matter also comes an embodied history, right? There's all the hands that passed through all of the ecosystems entangled in that, the living beings, the market dynamics, and the narratives. So,
and it reminds me of what you told me, I don't know, some time ago about how you think of myths as like imagining a desirable future and then sort of walking through the steps that got you to that desirable future, right? And so if we hold that one day in the future, all of us will hold with reverence the knowledge that our computers came from the ground, what steps do we take to go there? What does that look like? And I think that's kind of aesthetically what our dream is of the Stone Soup cluster, that this website right here it's 4 blocks away. You can literally walk to it. You can walk there with me.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about like the web rings from the previous talk also as like, you know, something where there's tangible relationships. Like you can ask someone, hey, can I put my files in your closet on your server? Because I'm worried I won't be able to hang on to them at my place. So yeah, what happens when you know your files are in your best friend's hands? When you can like walk to a website and just unplug it, or
pop in extra RAM chips from your old machine.
Yeah.
Is there a way to make it visible and ground it in our actual hands? And you know, I guess let's continue. I have other things in mind. These hands.
Yeah. So one thing in our conceiving of Secret Server Club was this idea of ritualizing data solidarity. What does that mean to you?
Well, it's like I've been thinking so much about the kind of material architecture of how the cloud works, that like Amazon Web Services' first product was called S3, super simple storage. And this is the cloud in iCloud. This is where your Arena board lives. This is where Netflix comes from. And what's fascinating about that as the file system that S3 uses as compared to the file system on your computer, which is hierarchical, like you know the trees of folders, this super hegemonic centralized service, inside of the bucket, everything, there's no hierarchy. Everything is at one level and all of your data is accessed at a layer of like software abstraction. But it's like what Maisa was talking about earlier, that this system tries to cleanly separate us from our neighbors when we are in fact more entangled than we have ever been. But it's this decentralized system that is held within a totally centralized like edifice, but you can take these tools and you can bring them back and use them with your friends. And so I'm thinking about like when we share an S3 bucket together and everybody can actually see everybody's files, what do we want to hold in common that might otherwise be siloed in a drive somewhere? Music, art, movies, music that you made. It's like you can host your own streaming service, but when you're there holding the data in common, when everybody can see everything, it completely shifts the way that we use this architecture.
Yeah, and that's totally similar to the notion of food sovereignty too, right? We can think about that as data sovereignty, and just thinking about how so much of navigating this moment of extreme systemic oppression calls on us to make relationships and strengthen our community relationships and bonds. And so much of that is just through daily practices of care for each other. So clicking on your friend's website could be that in one way.
Or like teaching your friend how you hosted the website instead of just doing it for them. I feel like Melanie was talking about the like torrent girlfriend. It's just like, we'll torrent it for you instead of teaching you how to do it, so you remain like technically dependent. It's like, how can you remove these human silos of technical dependency?
Yeah, and I guess that's now that we're hearing some whales coming into the picture, like what do you think happens when that becomes like this perpetual public practice? It's what it becomes normalized instead of this like notion of always scaling.
I know. How does it scale is a question that I really, my politics don't scale, or not like that. It's like, how can you think of something bottom up rather than top down in a way that's like genuinely non-hierarchical? And it's like, I think there's this way that we used to kind of think of software. I mean, more metaphors of shipping, that you would ship code because it used to be a disk, and like updating things was difficult. But like, and returning to the concept of messiness, like, I think there's something about making something that's messy, that works, that you're using, because then you go from the realm of ideas where like, oh, I'm not sure if I would like it that way, to like testing with your body, like, how does it feel to use this together? Because it's like, you can't just imagine every conceivable scenario before you build a piece of software, and it's possible to really just like change things so rapidly.
And that reminds me of like how we were talking about, you know, this notion of threat modeling is super pervasive, but what is the inverse of that? Like, you know, building trust with people. We threw around the term desire modeling.
I know, what's the inverse of threat modeling? Because it's not, obviously it's not like attack modeling, but it's like, how do you envision this? Because it's like, I don't know, I learned about this thing called jump hosting, where you can like connect to a server that's like really protected, and then connect to other services from that server. And so this is called a bastion host. But what if you could do something that's more like, if you show up at Plot and connect to the Wi-Fi, then you can get access to the system. That like
a blanket for hosts.
Exactly. If you go to a place where people are, you can actually like find your way into this rabbit's warren of websites that are all over the city. It's like, that's the desirable outcome that we're trying to model, rather than thinking about who would come attack us, who would come attack our computer club.
Yeah. Instead, we want to invite you all to participate in the Stone Soup cluster, and our sort of vision of like sharing, skill sharing and practice sharing and resource sharing.
So here are like some of the servers in the Stone Soup cluster, and there's a little network diagram of how our little stack works right now. But the dream is that if you have an old PC and you want to connect it to the cluster, it could be configured as either a storage node that adds capacity to our collective storage system, or a web server node that collectively hosts a network of websites. And I want that to be as easy as a single install script. And I would love for people to be in the room together, working over old computers that might not be working, or might seem like they work poorly, like sort of building in both the like e-waste recovery, and also like, what can you do with a server once you have one?
Yeah, I think that's also something too, where it's like this question of like accessibility and transparency, like that all gets much easier when you have someone you can talk to in the same room, and just like share a sense of presence. And I don't like, that kind of also leads me to this question around like the protopian visions of alternative networks and computing. Like, I don't know if you had any that are currently inspiring you.
I can ask you the same question.
Yeah, I mean, I just read this book, A Half-Built Garden, by Ruth Anna Emrith, and it details this vision of the future where this like community bioregional networks called dandelion networks have been used to like coordinate a massive governance shift. So suddenly everyone switched to following these governance models, and they were able to like isolate all the corporations to one like commercial free zone. But then the aliens show up and they're like, hey, it's time for you to leave Earth. And everyone's like, we just started figuring out how to live like more biocentrically. We don't want to leave.
I love to imagine an Earth that is so good that we don't want to leave it.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, kind of an echo back to some of the questions framed around this event. And I think one thing we also kind of thought about with that is like the framing of the Earth as finite being maybe, you know, based on not thinking in this fourth dimension of like ongoing symbiosis, like continual ecological renewal and interaction and care.
And I mean, it was so interesting when you were playing me the sound of the data center earlier. It sounded like there's this like stretching algorithm called a pulse stretch that you can use to stretch out a sound like 10 times as long as its initial size. And that's what I thought you had done to that sound. And it felt like this really like poetic metaphor of what's happening in a data center, that it is eating up and compressing time in this way that changes how all of us experience it. Like, I feel like it was Francois Bonnet who called this like the hyper present, that we're really just like compressing our sense experience to such a narrow window. We feel no presence in any past or future. And like, look around, like how it's not particularly easy to imagine a future at all.
Then at the same time, I think this is where grounding in like a deeper time understanding of like all of the living that's happening on the earth, and like, you know, taking in also like the maybe non-duality of like contemporary electronic technology, and that has, you know, like maybe a way of guiding us towards like a more space of equanimity to act from. Sometimes I think like thinking in deep time is often very helpful for that. And something I feel is really special about Secret Server Club is like the playful nature of our interactions, like creates a space for that type of more imaginary thinking.
Absolutely. And it's like, I feel like rituals have to begin as play, and you have to kind of get out of the way of your own self-judgment, because it can feel kind of cringe to begin a ritual. And it's like only after you've kind of held it for long enough that it becomes like a part of your body. And I've been thinking about the deep time of data, where it's like, you know, like in the fire, my family lost like a family Bible that dates probably to like 1860s. And it's like, wow, okay. It like, you know, like 150, 175 years in the future, well, is there data that we are creating now that will be held by some future human? And like, it's a chain of hands that hold each other between now and eternity.
Yeah, so what stories do you all want to make sure stay in that chain?
So what happens when the APIs stop being subsidized and the formerly hyper-compensated engineers are laid off?
I think we're maybe going to see that somewhat soon, but maybe not. I think, you know, it's with any future visioning, I like to also think of like, how do you treat this as like a playful opportunity, or like what is the like, you know, thinking backwards from this like collective desire of a future that we want. How does that become a step in there? Like what computer club like are we going to set up to be like, hey, you just lost your job, you want to come like build some computers out of trash with us?
And like, yeah, it's strange how this like brief like Silicon Valley madness created this weird, where like sequestered the like hacker class in like golden handcuffs, where it's like they sort of acted as this brain drain, like preventing just like a massive subset of people with technical knowledge from like doing anything productive for society besides like developing yet another way to deliver a taxi or a burrito with a taxi. There's more that we can do than answer emails. There's more that we can do than decide what to have for lunch. There's more we can do besides murdering poor people abroad.
Yeah, and we can start experimenting with that. We actually already are, like this temporary archive is one form of that.
And yeah, it's like the infrastructure we're talking about here isn't speculative. Those pictures over there, that's a website called Pictures that I made specifically to test whether our decentralized storage cluster technology called Garage would work. And it works. It's hosted between a little tiny server at our studio and another one at Plot. And so this is the part where we start adding more capacity and like expanding these rituals for more people to join us.
Yeah. So we'd love to see some of you at, hit us up if you want to put a computer in your bedroom or your garage or your studio. Yeah. Do we want to throw a question to the crowd?
Oh yeah. Where does your computer come from?
And where do you want it to go?
Your computer came from Jalisco. That's amazing.
Yeah, so Secret Server Club, also an invitation to dismantle the like extractive systems that have been woven into so much of our contemporary life. Yeah.
I'm thinking about like feelings of digital intimacy that like your personal computer feels so like sovereign, almost like you wouldn't want anybody to look at it. And when you start thinking about like what do we want to hold in common? So like my partner and collaborator Hal like merged our digital music libraries and put them in one streaming server together, and it felt so much like sharing a home together in a way that really is like, it's not the same as sharing a Spotify playlist. To like have them co-located on the same physical hard drive. It's like a cozy feeling that it sort of defies description.
Yeah, I'm also thinking about 𝐼𝐡𝐢𝐬𝐩 and 𝐶𝐚𝐧𝐡's like concept of mess, and how there's like a certain like experience of that also when you're like figuring out how to set up a server with your friends.
And when we were all SSHing in for the first time and just like spamming each other with messages through the wall or figuring out how to boot each other, where it really felt like, wow, we're all like in the engine room of this little computer.
Yeah, unexpected game world.
It all starts with a folder and some intention. It really does. Or it's like, you know, people will try to scare you with like, oh, the 3-2-1 rule, it has to be in 2 locations in 3 different drives. Like 2 is more than 1. Like you've got an SD card. If you like it's the choosing to hold some things together that you want to keep safe is an impetus to then keep it safe. 2 SD cards, more than 1 SD card. Like you can think, how much data do you have? Maybe you have 10 terabytes. I hope you don't. But like, think in terms of 1 gigabyte, 10 gigabytes, 100 gigabytes. 100 gigabytes is not expensive. Like what if that's your go bag? What goes in there? Like what is really special to you? And then that's a way of looking in the mess of your files, like, and actually finding these like mediated memories that are kind of the substance of how we hold history in our bodies.
Yeah, and then also like that's something we're experimenting with our secret server is like, can we have like hold each other's copies of each other's secret or most precious folders
in like pentuplicate on little drives, like 5 is more than 2. And, you know, sometimes quality is better than quantity. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Whisper. Thank you, Shanhuan. Okay, up next, I will be in conversation with Kira Zanarica. We'll just do a quick changeover and start that.